Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our program today entitled The Fight for the Right to Fight, a Black history program brought to you by the men and women of the National Montford Point Marine Association, Inc., Atlanta Chapter 5. We want to welcome all of our chapter members, national members, our special guest panel, and our viewers tuning in on our YouTube channel from all over the country. While you are here, please take a moment to press the subscribe button. I know your time is valuable. However, I want to highly encourage you to stick around because we will have a special guest appearance from an original Montford Point Marine that will share with us a reflection of his time at the Montford Point camp and the legacy of the Montford Point Marines. Before we go any further, allow me a moment to recognize the chapter president of the National Montford Point Marine Association, Atlanta Chapter 5, retired Sergeant Major Johnny Higdon.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Black History program, showcasing the contributions of the Montford Point Marines. Again, I am Johnny Higdon, the president of the National Montford Point Marine Association Incorporation, Atlanta Chapter 5. And we have a wealth of information packed in this program. So everyone sit back, relax, and listen as several Marines share their experience with the Montford Point Marines. Again, thank you all for tuning in. Darlene, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. The purpose of the program today is to increase the public's awareness of the service and sacrifice of the original Montford Point Marines. As we pause to recognize and celebrate the many contributions of African Americans to this nation, it is only fitting that we talk about the Montford Point Marines. As significant as they are to the history of the Marine Corps, many people today still may be wondering, who are the Montford Point Marines? To be clear, the Montford Point Marines are just as Marine as any other Marine who has earned the coveted Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. They simply have the unique distinction of serving at a time when our nation was dealing with segregation, which prevented them from training at Paris Island with their white counterparts. While the Montford Point Marines played a critical role during major conflicts such as World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, they served during a time when their service and contributions were not often credited or recognized. It is our hope that by the end of this program, you will learn more about the trailblazing service of the first African Americans allowed to serve in the United States Marine Corps. To kick things off, I want to share a brief 8-minute video featuring the former Commandant and Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps as they pay tribute to the Montford Point Marines.
The spirit of our Corps, embodied in the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor, lives within the soul of every Marine. This spirit is born through arduous rite of passage at boot camp and officer training, after which a young man or woman is called a United States Marine for the first time. Our ethos has been shaped by ordinary men and women, patriots who showed extraordinary leadership and courage, both physical and moral.
From 1942 to 1949, approximately 20,000 African American men enlisted in the Marine Corps at a time when our nation was at war and the country and military services were resistant to integration. They came from the North and from the South, from all walks of life. They came for different reasons. Some wanted the challenge of being a Marine, some wanted to earn a living, but all came to protect and serve their country honorably. They arrived on a rugged and heavily wooded 5.5-acre site near Jacksonville, North Carolina, called Montford Point. The first group of these pioneering Marines built the now famous camp of wooden huts. Others that followed fell in on their handiwork. They braved a variety of threats, everything from the swagger sticks of tough drill instructors to the snakes and the mosquitoes, and even those bears that inhabited the land. In many cases, they were challenged harder than their white counterparts, entering the Corps at the same time.
These brave Marines served with honor during a critical period in our nation's history, fighting in some of the bloodiest struggles in the Pacific, Saipan, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. Some died in these epic island battles. Many others continued their service in the colds of Korea and the jungles of Vietnam. Many Montford Point veterans, men like Gilbert Hashmark Johnson, Edgar Huff, and Frederick C. Branch, are now legends in the rich history of the Marine Corps.
In June of 1942, I saw a newspaper article to the effect that the Marine Corps had begun accepting Negroes for service with the Corps.
Well, you know, you can't think of being Marine without thinking about the Montford Pointers, because they are the beginning. You often question yourself, could I have done that? Could I have had the perseverance to come and to join an organization, first, that didn't want you, two, that had the history of being the last service to integration?
The Marine Corps, basically, in the early days, were looking for the best black men that they could find. Four corners of the country. We had men coming in who had their degrees. Some had both their degrees and had a couple of years in vocation. We call them the mighty platoon.
We knew we were being trained harder, and of course the DIs would tell us that you know, they're going to make us superior to all of the other white Marines, particularly. In fact, as a matter of fact, we were breaking every record that they ever had because they pushed us to the end of endurance to where we just couldn't go any further.
You think about where they came and why they came. Many of them were doing just fine where they are. Some were educators, some were professional ball players, some even owned their own business. Some were farmers, and some were just working in factories. But they came because they felt in their heart of hearts that our nation needed their support, needed them to be a part of what was good about America. And a lot of them felt that when they came, or when they provided their contributions, that somehow that they would convince the world, as well as America, that they had earned the right to all of the rights and privileges there are of being Americans.
I went in late enough, and we had all white officers, but we had black drill instructors.
Hashmark Johnson was much older than we were. He had spent about 3 tours in the Army, and he came and he had about 2 tours in the Navy, and that's how he got to be called Hashmark. He got the service, he earned service stripes, so he had about 3 of them, I think.
Hashmark was a very strong disciplinarian. In contrast, Huff was about twice the size of Hashmark, and Huff was a big guy. And whereas Hashmark would issue stern disciplinary kinds of orders, Huff would walk up to you softly and knock you on the deck if you didn't comply.
I left home to join the Marine Corps, and when I joined the Marine Corps, when I got to Montford Point, I had 25 cents in my pocket. That's all I had. And the last suit, I had it on, and I came in the Marine Corps to stay.
Huff was strictly one on the DI. He was a tough guy, tall, big, and strong. And so when he spoke to you, you moved. You didn't dare say anything because you know, like I said, you were at his mercy. As I said, they could do anything they wanted to do, and they did.
The Marine Corps today is much better than it was for the minority. I see sergeants, majors, I see generals, colonels, When I got out of the Marine Corps, there was only one lieutenant.
Remember when they came in, there was no black officers at all. Matter of fact, when Fred Branch in 1945 was the first African-American commissioned, one of the stipulations that he had to come from the Montford Point Marines.
But I always look at the photograph of Fred receiving his second lieutenant commission, the big smile on his face and his lovely lady beside him. I have a pretty good idea what Fred went through, but I have no idea what his personal experiences were. Given the times, I just have to assume that Fred caught hell.
Now we've got generals with 3 stars, so that's a big change. And then myself, when I went as a private, I never had any concept that we'd ever have a black officer, and yet I became one of them.
There's no question. Especially after I had an opportunity to meet them and become a part of them and be mentored by them, that when you listen to their stories of their struggles and the things that they did, and more particularly the things that they did to overcome adversity, they were all tools that I put in my kit bag. And as I came up, as I matured through the Marine Corps and encountered some of the similar things that they did, but nothing at all close to what they had been through in the 40s. I would remember things that they said, things they did, and use it to help me. One of the things they taught me was, if you're focused on your mission, if you know what you want to do, nobody can stop you from doing that.
So you want to think that when you step into the footsteps of these giants and the legacy for which they have left you, that you measure up. And so that inspiration is beyond words. Because of what they have done as a part of that fabric of creating American history.
And they told me that they're climbing up on my shoulders, but they did the work. They did the work. And I'm very proud of them.
It's the responsibility of the Marine Corps to anchor the story of Montford Point in the annals of the Marine Corps' rich history. Every Marine, from private to general, should know the history of the Montford Point Marines, who crossed the threshold to fight not only the enemy they were to know overseas, but that of racism and segregation in their very own country. Collectively, they paved the way for the many thousands of Marines of various backgrounds, men and women alike, who serve our nation today with honor, courage, and commitment.
We hope you enjoyed the video. You can find this video and many others like it on our YouTube channel. I would like to share another friendly reminder for those that have not pressed the subscribe button yet. Please take a moment to do so now. Your subscription allows you to remain abreast of content that is published by the chapter. I would now like to introduce a special guest to help put the service of the Montford Point Marines into historical context. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce a past national president and current national public relations officer of the National Montford Point Marine Association, Inc., to include the author of the Congressional Gold Medal Bill received by the Montford Point Marines. Ladies and gentlemen, Master Gunnery Sergeant Retired Joe Geeter III.
Well, thank you so much, and good afternoon, everybody. First, I'd like to thank Johnny for the invitation to be here. It's always my honor to talk about Montford Point. I actually left a Congressional Gold ceremony to come here to be with you today. When I watched that video, and that video is by far one of my favorites. It's 8 minutes and 32 seconds long. It features 4 original Montford Point Marines that were all mentors to me. Unfortunately, all 4 are gone now. You saw Gene Doherty first. He served as our national president twice in 2 separate tours, and Gene fought on Iwo Jima. He actually spent his 20th birthday fighting on Iwo Jima. Next, you saw Joe Carpenter, Lieutenant Colonel Joe Carpenter. I was fortunate enough to have Colonel Carpenter as my national historian when I was national president, and he lobbied for the Congressional Gold Medal with me side by side for over 50 trips to Washington, D.C. Colonel Carpenter was a native Washingtonian. He knew the area. At first, I felt uncomfortable. I would get to D.C., he would put me in his vehicle, and he would drive me to Capitol Hill or anywhere we had to go to lobby. So Colonel Carpenter was buried in Arlington about a year ago. He reached the rank of Lieutenant Colonel, and he was the first African-American Marine to work at Headquarters Marine Corps. Next, you saw Nathaniel Hosea. Nathaniel Hosea was a Master Gunnery Sergeant and was the Western Regional Vice President for many years. I met him along with many other of these Montford Pointers over 30 years ago. And the last person you saw was Ken Rollick. And all the Montford Pointers are special to me, but Ken has a special place in all of our hearts. He was so determined to make one more convention after his wife Mary died that he came to my house, spent the night with me, and I carried him to Las Vegas. Ken Rollick fought on the island of Saipan, again, one of the first Montford Point Marines to see combat in June of 1944. So all those things are very important. And of course, we saw Lieutenant General Frank Peterson. Many of you know General Peterson has a ship named after him. It was christened a couple of years ago in Mobile, Alabama. It will be commissioned, and we just got this date yesterday, on the 14th of May in Charleston, South Carolina. So the association will receive more information about these gentlemen. Again, that video, and I know I only got 5 minutes, I'm going to condense a lot of stuff if I can. But that video really captured a lot of the history. So I want to talk about for a minute or two is the history after that. Because in 1965, a group of these Montford Pointers right here in Philadelphia, where I am, decided to get the old gang back together. And this was before internet, before anything. So they used the offices of Cecil B. Moore. And many Americans know Cecil B. Moore as a fiery civil rights leader, but he was also a Montford Point Marine. And he was also the Sergeant Major of the 51st Defense Battalion. So Cecil B. Moore, Brooks Gray, and many other founding fathers got together to plan a reunion at the Adelphia Hotel in Philadelphia on September 15th to the 17th in 1965. They had no idea who was going to show up. And I've heard the stories many times over the years that every time the elevator opened up, hey, baby, how you doing? I haven't seen you in 20 years. So that first reunion, and it was a reunion, turned into the National Montford Point Marine Association. It chartered its first chapter, Chapter 1, Philadelphia, in 1966. Brooks Gray, retired Master Gunnery Sergeant, served as the first national president. Now, our chapters are numbered in order of seniority, and the first 10 are known as the Mighty Chapters, just like Gene Doherty said in that video, the Mighty Platoons. So those first 10 platoons were the Mighty Platoons, and Sergeant Major Huff served in the 9th Platoon. But they all arrived at Montford Point Camp around the same time, between the last week in August and the first week of September in 1942. So our association has grown over the last 57 years. We're celebrating 57 years as an association, and we're actually in the 80th year of Montford Point Camp opening on August 26, 1942. Out of those first 10 chapters, I believe 8 of them are still very active. Chapter 4 and Chapter 7 are not, but Chapter 5 Atlanta has been active since it started up, I believe, in 1967. So Atlanta chapter, I've worked with many chapter presidents, Chris Primos, Elliot Martin, Fred Coles, Linda Sykes served a couple of tours, and now Johnny has the helm. So I'm so proud of Johnny and the Atlantic chapter. I'm proud of the signature event that they were putting on every year, prior to the pandemic. And we had Lou Gossett at their event the last time they put it on. So Atlantic chapter is always on the move. They have a lot of initiatives in and around the Atlantic chapter that make us all proud, that make us all very proud. But finally, I want to talk about some of the initiatives that we're doing right now. What are we doing right now? In January, I was working with authors on 5 different books to tell the story of Montford Point. 2 of those books have been published. Captain Eddie Q. Hicks, original Montford Pointer, finally published his memoirs, To Walk on Water. Captain Hicks, I met him again over 30 years ago. I've been attached to these gentlemen for over 3 decades. I've been teaching the history of Montford Point for over 4 decades, and I've been a member of this association for 35 years. It'll be 35 years in June. So Captain Hicks' book is out. Also, Gene Mosley, whose dad, Staff Sergeant Thomas Mosley, told him all kinds of stories, and Gene had the wherewithal to take notes. And 7 years ago, he started his journey to write his book, Footprints of the Montford Point Marines. That book just got published a couple of weeks ago. I had the honor to be with Gene Mosley today He was at our double Congressional Gold Medal ceremony, and he signed and sold some of his books today, and it was a fabulous day today. So our history is being told. Currently working with an author, Dave Brown, in North Carolina. I'm sure Colonel Gaskin's familiar with Dave Brown. He's telling the stories of the Montford Pointers and beyond. He has interviewed General Cliff Stanley, he has interviewed Sergeant Major McMichael, myself, and a few others. We're really looking forward to that book. Another book we just got started with an author in Washington, D.C., and there'll be more information on that later. The final book is probably the biggest book because it's going to be a graphic novel. We're working with some professors at San Francisco State University. I just signed a contract with Oxford Press to have that book published. It's going to be an incredible book. We're partnering with the New York school system to get that book in the New York public schools. Once it's in the New York public schools, and it's the largest school district in America, we're hoping that's going to snowball into other schools. So that's going to happen. We've signed the contract. We've done the interviews. As a matter of fact, my basement, many of you know, is a museum to the Montford Pointers. So we're trying to get the illustrations done now. We've got a deadline of September of 2024 to get that book out. And it's going to be not only an informational book, but it's going to create some funds for our association to allow us to continue the legacy. The biggest project that we're working on, and I've been working with the filmmaker, Raj Amit Kamoor, for close to 10 years now. And that's the working title is called Black Boots. So please visit the website, Black Boots, the movie, and you can see how four of us, and that's Dr. Everhart, our current national president, Master Gunnery Sergeant Carr, our past national vice president, Gilbert Taylor, Master Gunnery Sergeant, our webmaster, and myself. We kind of call ourselves the Four Horsemen because collectively, we've got about 120 years service with the Marine Corps and over 100 years service with the Montford Pointers. So this is what we do. We do this work every day. This is not a passing fantasy. This is my life's work. Some people call it a passion. Some people call it a calling. Call it what you want, but I live, breathe every day on Montford Point, how I can move our association forward. Now, what can you do? You can join. You can make sure your membership is current. These chapters are working hard. Tonight, Camp Lejeune, Chapter 10, is doing a Heritage Ball. Tomorrow, Charlotte, Chapter 40, is going to award 5 Congressional Gold Medals. And we just have events going on all through, not just Black History Month, but every month of the year. So I am privileged and honored to hold the same position that General Bolden held in 1975. He was our National Public Relations Officer. So many of these general officers you see, to include General Gaskin on this Zoom call today, we've been friends, General, I don't know, 30 years or more, and his former father-in-law was a Montford Point Marine and a dear friend of mine, Master Sergeant Fred Drake, located in Beaufort, South Carolina. So we're all connected. And I like to stay connected, and I'm available. And many of you have called me. If you need something, pick up the phone and give me a call. I'm here for you. My 5 minutes is up. Johnny, is back to you.
Thank you, Joe Geeter.
Okay.
We will now move forward with our special guests and our distinguished panel, allowing you to hear from some of the Corps' finest as they share their story, their gained knowledge of the Montford Point Marines' historic service, and the impact this had on their career. The distinguished panel consists of our special guest, Ambassador Britton. Ambassador Britton left home in January of 1944 to join the United States Marine Corps, where he served in the Pacific Theater during World War II. After being discharged, he enrolled at New York University until the beginning of the Korean War. Ambassador Britton was then called to active duty with the United States Marine Corps, where he served until May of 1951. On November 17, 1974, President Gerald Ford nominated Britton to serve as the United States ambassador to the island nations of Barbados and Grenada. Additionally, Britton was tasked with simultaneously serving as the United States Special Representative to the small West Indian island nations of Antigua, Dominica, St. Christopher, Nevis, Anguilla, St. Vincent, and St. Lucia. Britton served as ambassador until April 22nd, 1977. In 1981, President Ronald Reagan appointed Ambassador Britton to serve as chairman of the United States-China-Soviet Union Agreement on Housing and Planning. He held that position from 1981 to 1989. During this period, Britton also traveled to over 150 countries as a lecturer, promoting international awareness and education. Ambassador Britton retired from the United States Foreign Service in 1989. Since the year 2000, Ambassador Britton has been regarded as the Ambassador for Peace of the South Korean-based Universal Peace Federation. In 2006, he was named as Honorary Consul General for the Republic of Albania, and the following year, he was a member of its Middle East Peace Initiative to Israel and Palestine. Our next panelist is Lieutenant General Walter Gaskin. Walter E. Gaskin Sr. is a retired United States Marine Corps Lieutenant General who served as the 19th Deputy Chairman of the NATO Military Committee from May 2009 to August 2013. Lieutenant General Gaskin also served as the Commanding General of the 2nd Marine Division at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, from June 2006 until July 2008. In addition to this role, he simultaneously served as the Commanding General of 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force Forward. During this tour, Lieutenant General Gaskin led 2 MEF Forward during its year-long deployment to Al-Anbar Province, Iraq, as the Commanding General of Multinational Forces West. He is currently serving as the Secretary for the North Carolina Department of Military and Veteran Affairs. Our next panelist is Sergeant Major Robin Fornter. Robin Fornter is a retired United States Marine Corps Sergeant Major, where she served for 30 years. During the last 15 years of her career, Robin has held senior executive level leadership positions where she led a diverse workforce of Marines and civilians directly responsible for mission accomplishment in Marine Corps ground, weaponry, and information technology systems. Robin is now an inspirational speaker, an entrepreneur, and executive coach. In October 2020, Robin founded R.C. Fortner Enterprises, LLC, a leadership and management solutions company committed to helping businesses thrive through developing high-performance teams while facilitating leadership programs that promote resilient team building strategies and boost employee morale. As a Marine Corps veteran, she has been battle-tested, defining her confidence, power, and resilience as a proven warrior leader. Our next panelist is Sergeant Major, retired United States Marine Corps, Mario P. Fields. He is a dynamic personality and highly sought after resource in business and professional circles for professionals looking to create and expand business opportunities. He served 26 years in the United States Marine Corps before transitioning to the private sector as a small business owner, philanthropist, podcast host, producer, and government contractor. Mario has developed, managed, and led diverse teams in the United States, Persian Gulf, Mediterranean Sea, Israel, United Arab Emirates, Africa, Australia, Cambodia, Philippines, South Korea, mainland Japan, Okinawa, Thailand, Kuwait, Iraq, and Afghanistan. His reputation reflects unquestionable integrity, resilience, accountability, and he has a strong passion for helping other people achieve their goals. Our next panelist is Master Sergeant Mario Harris. Mario Harris is a retired United States Marine Master Sergeant that served faithfully and honorably for over 27 years. Throughout his distinguished career, he was an equal opportunity representative, former school instructor, certified master trainer, curriculum developer, and certified master instructor. His commitment to equality, solid leadership skills, conflict resolution, and command experience has given him the distinctive ability to take extremely complicated procedures and situations and turn them into teachable moments. While founding a 501c3 nonprofit for mentoring youth and young adults, he uses skills that were obtained as a facilitator and his training as a formal school instructor and certified master trainer. He trained over 400 personnel on unit marine awareness and prevention training that included leadership, diversity, equity, conflict resolution, bystander intervention, and stress management. He trained in the United States Marine Corps as an equal opportunity representative. Also, he has trained military leadership in areas of diversity and equality. Mario has a wealth of knowledge in policy, practices, cyclical processes needed to be effective when addressing these concerns in the workplace. Our next panelist is Gunnery Sergeant Morgan Drinkard. She is the youngest of the bunch, but her resume is quickly filling up. With just 12 years in the Corps, she is a motivated gunnery sergeant of Marines and has served a tour on the drill field where she helped to mold the future generations of Marines. She is currently serving at Headquarters Marine Corps as the Staff Non-Commissioned Officer in charge of board support. Also, one of her biggest accolades is being the voice on the 244th Marine Corps Cadence video that was released a couple of years ago. In case you forgot, here is a reminder.
Take it on the left foot. Take it on the left foot. Mighty, mighty left foot. Mighty, mighty left foot. Take it. Take it. I got it. She's got it. All these devil dog
James Clausell Sr. is a retired Marine and is currently serving as the Global Transportation Lead at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta, Georgia. He is responsible for managing the CDC's International Motor Vehicle Fleet, developing and advising on transportation and shipping policies, and managing transportation contracts. James retired from the United States Marine Corps in 2015, having held leadership and subject matter expert roles in logistics, transportation, project management, contracting, and acquisition. He serves as a co-director for Blacks in Government Region 4, National Board of Directors, Blacks in Government, Inc., and the recording secretary, National Montford Point Marine Association, Atlanta, Chapter 5. Now that you have been introduced to this all-star panel, we will present the first question to Lieutenant General Gaskin. Lieutenant General Gaskin, when did you first hear about the Montford Point Marines, and what does the story of their service mean to you?
Darling, thank you for the question. You know, it's kind of humbling to answer that question because it's a two-part introduction for me. I arrived in January of 1975 as a second lieutenant in 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines, Camp Lejeune, one of 5 Black officers in the entire regiment and the only one in my battalion. So I realized that I'm now a second lieutenant, have to be responsible for all the vets that were returning from Vietnam. But I really didn't have to worry because that's where I met the Montford Point Marines. They knew the challenges that facing of being African-American in the Marine Corps, but they also knew that I was a product of them. Therefore, they became mentors, fathers, butchers, and everything else to get the second lieutenant the opportunity to demonstrate what he or she had earned. And so that was the first time that I was introduced to the Montford Pointers. They were just guardians and mentors. The second part of that, as I transferred back from Okinawa, from leaving Lejeune, I arrived at Parris Island, South Carolina, where I met my former wife, and I had a chance to meet Master Sergeant Drake that Geeter was talking about. Master Sergeant Drake was a retired Montford Point Marine, dynamic, but he gave me the inner story of what they had gone through from the time that he arrived from Alabama to the dusty places and the swampy areas of what we now call Camp Johnson. He also told me about what it really means to fight for the right to fight, how difficult it was to even go into town in Jacksonville and Court Street and where you had to be after hours. But he also told me that along with his neighbor, who was Staff Sergeant Vaughn, who was a drill instructor, that why there in Port Royal, they had named their street Sergeant's Drive because of all the 3 sergeants that lived on that street as Montford Pointers, and why it was important that I show up, demonstrate, and show that we were right to have Marines of color in the Montford Pointers. So that lifestyle became my foundation. And I often tell them that I stand on your shoulders and I am a Marine because you wanted to be a Marine. So I met them very early in my career. And until the last day, 39 years later, the lessons learned from them was what guided me throughout.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant General Gaskin. Sergeant Major Robin Fornter. When did you first hear about the Montford Point Marines? And what does the story of their service mean to you?
Yeah, thank you again, Darlin, for all you're doing. I do appreciate the question. I want to just take a second to thank the chapter as well. So, Johnny, I truly appreciate the opportunity of actually being here. Thank you so much. And I mean, the esteemed panel, it's a pleasure to be here amongst them. It's humbling, actually, to be here amongst and then to go after Lieutenant General Gaskins. Wow. But just to answer your question, I wish I could say that I understood what Montford Point Marines meant early in my career. I cannot. It was some time before I really understood what that meant, even though I did my MOS school down at Camp Lejeune, right there close to Johnson. I don't think we really understood why it was named Camp Johnson, and it wasn't stressed. It was some years later that I just started to hear that there was something called Montford Point. I think we kept messing up how to spell it, messing up how to pronounce it. We truly didn't really even understand the impact that it had. I would say I was trying to think of exactly when I heard, and I can't really pinpoint exactly when, but a vivid time that sticks out to me when I truly started to understand. But just because I heard the name, I really didn't understand exactly that impact and why that was important for a young African-American woman now serving in uniform. And I would have to give credit to James Averhart, who is the national president now, but he was a previous president as well. And I just remember seeing him in the staff NCO clubs. That tells you I'm already a staff NCO at this point. And he just kept asking me, "Hey, sister," you know, and the way he can do, he just started asking me what I knew, and you know, just try to. And not in a forceful way, but just in an awareness way. And that's when I realized a little bit more, and it started to be a lot more apparent to me. You know, it's almost like buying a car. When you finally buy that car, you see a whole lot of cars the same color. It was like as soon as he impacted that in my heart, I started seeing and recognizing more things about Montford Point. And then I started to attend a lot more events. And that's when it became more apparent. Original Montford Pointers would be at these events, videos like the one we just saw, or some type of recognition. I think that's important. If we're not around it, we just don't always know it. We just don't know it's there and what the impact is. And then I would say that what it means to me in my career, I'll tell you that too is a question that we could sit here all day with, because it shaped me once I truly understood. I think we all know, at least I did, as an African-American woman in the Marine Corps, I knew it was in a whole lot of us. We understood that that we are minorities. So it was very important for me anyway to represent. But as I thought about my time on Camp Johnson when I was the Staff NCO Academy Director, and if you don't know, the schoolhouse is housed right where the original Montford Pointers trained. You know, some of the original buildings are there. A lot of the old buildings that's marked for history. And that's it. I just recall walking those hallways, just thinking, what was it like? You know, just kind of feeling that feeling of that this used to be open squad base, and Montford Point Marines used to train in and around here. Looking at the heads and the shape they're in now, walking the streets and just trying to wonder how was life like back there being segregated. So that too became part of me, that I had to understand the resilience and the grit and what it took for them to go through anything or any adversity, just so I could stand here as the Sergeant Major of the Staff NCO Academy in the capacity, not just an African-American, but also a woman at the highest rank that the military has to offer. And it was my job to pay that forward. And I took that to heart. So what I'm proud to say, right there on Camp Johnson is the Montford Point Museum. And I didn't do it at first, but I realized it's my responsibility to keep this legacy going. And I remember holding a director's run. And at the end of that run, they didn't know it at the time, but we ran straight to the museum. I had it already coordinated with Takesha Smiley inside. And those students, whether they wanted to or not, sweat dripping down, it didn't matter. I marched them right inside that museum. And I look at the pictures now, and I look at every Marine just looking on a wall, learning about you know, the Hashmock Johnsons and the Edgar Huffs and Fredericks Branch, learning about who these people are and that they had never heard of before. And so every little bit that we can do to pay it forward, I think that's our responsibility. And I still hold that dear today. If you look behind me, I took this picture. I was like, I'm going to display this picture because it's important that this is where our origin and our foundation comes from. It doesn't matter if I'm a woman or a male. I know that I stand on those shoulders, and my career was definitely built and shaped by what they was proud and had the courage enough to endure. So thank you again for that question, darling.
Thank you, Sergeant Major Robin Fornter. Thank you, ma'am. Sergeant Major Mario P. Fields. When did you first hear about the Montford Point Marines, sir? And what does the story of their service mean to you?
Well, first of all, good afternoon, Darling and Ambassador Britton, President Higdon, and our esteemed colleagues that's on the panel and those who are watching. You know, for me, you know, I may look tall on camera, but you know, coming in at 5'4" and going to Marine combat training, you know, those 10 and 20 mile humps, they were brutal for someone of this size. And so I was like, man, this has been a tough beginning to a Marine Corps journey. Maybe I should not have joined the Marine Corps. This is kind of tough. And so then they said, hey, Lance Corporal Fields, you're going to Camp Johnson for school. And I get to Camp Johnson, we couldn't drive. And this was December of 1993. And so I said, you know, I saw a museum and I said, yeah, I'm gonna walk Montford Point Museum. I said, I can't drive. I'm trying to figure out if I've made a mistake or not in my life. Things are tough, right? I'm thinking, you know, man, things are so tough for little Marines. And so I walk in this museum, I give my greetings to the fine gentleman that was at the desk. And oh my gosh, I started reading about the Montford Point Marines and what they endured and the courage and grit and resilience that they had to display, the integrity and the just volunteer. I mean, they were professionals from all walks of life. And to say, you know what, I'm going to give up my comforts to go do something and join an organization that does not want me. Reading about the train rides, where they had to sit, and all the things that they had to go through to earn the title United States Marine. When I walked out of that museum in December of 1993, I said, you need to stop. And I was counseling myself. I said, you need to stop worrying about how tall you are. You need to stop complaining about this is tough and the 10-mile hikes are tough. If the Montford Point Marines could have done it, you can do it. And then I took a 360 look on Camp Johnson, kind of what Robin said. And I said, this is where it began. So my job now was to honor their legacy and stop complaining and be the most motivated, you know, Marine I can be. And it's propelled my career. It's provided me that sense of pride and energy, you know, when I had bad days and tough moments. And it's really shaped who I am today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant Major Mario P. Fields. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Master Sergeant Mario Harris. Share with us, when did you first hear about the Montford Point Marines? And what does the story of their service mean to you?
Good afternoon, Ms. Darling, and everyone on the panel. Sergeant Major Retired Johnny Higdon, thank you very much for this opportunity, esteemed panel. I arrived at Camp Johnson in 1991 to attend Personnel Administration School to learn the trade of being a unit diary clerk. And unlike Mr. Mario P. Fields, I didn't go to the museum. I was involved in other things. Immaturity, you know, that does play a part when we're younger. And my focus was to be the best Marine I could at the time and graduate from that school, my MOS school. I'll fast forward years later. In 2003, I was a staff sergeant by this time, and I got I transferred to Marine Corps Spelling D. Butler Reserve Center in Folsom, Pennsylvania. I had the esteemed pleasure of being in charge of the funeral detail for Mr. Frederick C. Branch. And I was trying to figure out why there were so many people there. And so the ceremony went forward and we did what we were supposed to do. After it was over, when I got back to the office, I started doing some research to figure out who Mr. Frederick Branch was. And I was excited to know the history that I found from reading about him. Years later in California, I was a Master Sergeant of Marines at this time, and there were promotion panels that they would hold. So I took it upon myself to ask young Marines questions about who was the first Black officer. Out of all those Marines that I asked, unfortunately, there was only 2, but at least 2 of them did know who he was. Because history is important to all of us. It matters to know the men and women that came before us, those that look like us and those that do not look like us. Because without each other, we could not have built this country or this world. So that's why it was so important to me after that. But when I first came into the Marine Corps, I had no idea. So my goal is to connect people and be connected to people that want to build communities, because that's how we thrive together. I love to learn about people that I don't know about and the history of those people. Being from Mobile, Alabama, is very important to me to know about those things in Alabama and other places. And so knowing about the men and women that came before me helped drive me to be the best Marine, the best man, husband, and father that I could be. Because being a husband and a father, I'm responsible for a family. And I want my children to know about people that look like them. Because unfortunately, a lot of that history is left out of the textbooks that are in our schools. And those things are changing. So I just like to say that's what it means to me. And that's the first opportunity I had to know about the Montford Point Marines. And I want to thank them and their families and everyone that's in association with them. And thank you all for having me.
Master Sergeant, thank you. Gunnery Sergeant Morgan Drinkard. Ma'am, when did you first hear about the Montford Point Marines? And share with us, what does the story of their service mean to you?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I would like to thank Sergeant Major for this wonderful opportunity. I feel unworthy. I feel like this panel is way above me, but it's a blessing for me to be a part of the panel and have the opportunity to speak about the Montford Point Marines. Unfortunately, I didn't hear about the Montford Point Marines until I became a drill instructor. During the time I was serving my tour on the drill field, I was on quota at the time, which is a break that we have between pushing recruits through recruit training. And I was on quota as the visit staff in COIC, where we would have visitors that come aboard Parris Island, and I would give them tours on base. And I remember it was maybe 2018 or 19 that I remember seeing a group of the Montford Point Marines. It was I remember looking, and it was a lot of retired Marines, and they were getting a tour. I think they were in the reviewing stands. And I remember looking at my series commander, and I asked her, and I said, who are those retired Marines? Because people were walking up to them and taking photos. And I just remember it was a group of African-American Marines, and everyone wanted to take pictures with them. And I'm like, who are those people? And my series commander, she goes, those are the Montford Point Marines. And I was like, who are the Montford Point Marines? And that's when she looked at me and she was baffled that I didn't know who they were. And she began to explain to me the history and, everything that they did. And I was upset because I didn't get the opportunity to take a photo with them. But I also started to do my research as well. And honestly, I would say that if it wasn't for the Montford Point Marines, I wouldn't have the opportunity that I had. Right now, I'm in the works of trying to submit an officer package. And if it wasn't for the Montford Point Marines, then I wouldn't be able to have that opportunity to do that. So, they paved the way for me. And, like I said before, this is such a humbling experience just to speak about them. So.
Thank you so much, Gunnery Sergeant Morgan Drinkard. Thank you. James Clausell. Sir, when did you first hear about the Montford Point Marines? And what does the story of their service mean to you?
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. First of all, I'd like to echo the words of my fellow panelists and thank you, Sergeant Major Hickman, Atlanta Chapter 5 President, Lieutenant General Gaskin, Sergeants Majors. Thank everybody for being on Gunnery Drunkard. That's outstanding what you're doing. Keep up the good work. Master Sergeant Harris, thank you as well. It's for me, and I would never forget it. It was my first year on recruiting duty in 2006. And I was already disgruntled because I went submitted a drill instructor package and the Marine Corps told me I was going to be a recruiter. So my first year, I was already kind of disgruntled because I didn't get my way. But the recruiting station Sergeant Major at the time, Sergeant Major Michael Logan, he grabbed a bunch of us and said, hey, y'all coming with me, get your dress blues on, you're coming with me. So of course, like, oh, here we go again, more recruiting activities. Here we go, contracts. And he took us to a banquet hosted by the National Montford Point Marine Association, St. Louis chapter. And that was my first time my jaw just dropped when I seen these World War II veterans, Black World War II veterans in Marine Corps uniform. I had been in the Marine Corps for about 10 years at that time. And I didn't know anything, like most of the other panelists. I didn't know anything. And as I'm walking around the room and I'm talking to these original Montford Pointers and they're sharing their stories and they're smiling and they're happy and they're Marines, they're brothers, they're doing what we're doing. We're all embracing as Marines, but their story is unique to Marines and they're sharing this with us. And at that moment, I was like, okay, I get it. I have nothing to be angry about, but do my mission. These gentlemen were not wanted in the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps was forced to take them and they volunteered to come to an organization that didn't want them. And not only did they volunteer, they excelled in some of the most harshest conditions, fighting a two-front war, fighting the war in the Pacific and fighting the war here at home with racism and segregation and Jim Crow. So I got it. I said, I have nothing to complain about. And I went on, finished my tour on recruiting duty. I went to Hawaii. As soon as I got to Hawaii, I went to Staff NCO Academy in Camp Pendleton. And I found out again, like myself, other Staff NCOs didn't know, Black or white. And we had to do a presentation at the Staff NCO Academy, a non-military presentation. And I went to my instructor and I said, I'm doing the Montford Point Marines. And he said, but we said no military history. And I said, but guess what? They're American history. They're not just restricted to the Marine Corps with their trials and tribulations. And the director approved it. I got approved, and and from that point on, I said, okay, it's my point and my purpose to make sure that my fellow Marines know about how we got here. Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, we all can trace ourselves back to the original Montford Pointers. And fast forward again to my last duty station in Quantico, where I was able to have the opportunity to join the Quantico chapter and really get involved and really starting to get to know the Montford Point Marines, the original Montford Point Marines, on a personal basis. And to this day, I still get tears in my eyes when I think about the sacrifice and the lineage that we come from. During that time in 2015, I was also able to find out that my god uncle is a Montford Point Marine. And so that really put an emphasis on everything that I do. So now my effort to preserve the legacy is to let everybody within my sphere of influence and out of my sphere of influence know about what the Montford Point Marines have done, not just for the African American community or the military community, but for America as a whole. And one of the things I'm proud to say we did, using some of the other leverage involved with other organizations, we were able to have Ambassador Britton speak at a Black History Month program about 4 years ago at the CDC. And that sparked more individuals coming to me saying, hey, you know, my father served in the Marine Corps in World War II. And as a result from that, myself and past Atlanta President Fred Coates were able to go and do a Congressional Gold Medal ceremony in Greenville, South Carolina. The individual, the Marine, original Montford Point Marine, who has since left us, his daughter and I worked together, and she'd seen the presentation, and we got to talking, and I just instantly went and put it into words. And she said, you know, that's my dad and I love him, but I think you're more energized about this than me. But which is true. And when we did his ceremony, and it was just that one, out of all the ceremonies, I shed a tear at every Congressional Gold Medal ceremony, but that one was special because here is this 90 years young man. He's coming in, he has his cane, he doesn't know what's going on. We're in his church, and this is a surprise, and he has his cane, and he's walking, you know, he's kind of feeble. He sees the Marines, he sees myself, Fred Coates, and there's a couple of other Marines there. He straightens up, starts low right aleo, comes up to the front, and he sits down, and we do everything. And after we give his Congressional Gold Medal, he stands up, holds his cane in the air and say, I wish this was my M1 and I was back in the Pacific. We have nothing to complain about. These gentlemen have endured, and that's the legacy that we inherit. And so that is my experience with the Montford Point Marines and why I'm loving and sharing the legacy. Thank you, Darlene.
Mr. James Clausell, sir, thank you. Thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned earlier, of encouraging you to remain tuned in to listen to an original Montford Point Marine joining us on the program today. That Montford Point Marine is none other than the legendary Ambassador Theodore Britton Jr. Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Britton.
My goodness, you guys really shake me up hearing all about what you've done. I remember when I first came out of boot camp, if I saw one stripe and a black tag on his cap, I'd run in the other direction. So seeing you with all of your stripes and stars just does so much for me. And Johnny, thank you so much for bringing us all together, because this is something that's needed for even our chapter. They don't know as much as they should know. But listen, I put together some comments, but I just have to thank you guys again for all that you have done and all that you're doing. But let me read some of the stuff that I wrote down. Picture this. I believe the year was 2011. Over 100 elderly Black men were making their first ever visit to the Commandant's mansion in Washington, D.C. And there stood they were being welcomed by the Commandant himself, General James Amos. Nearby stood Lieutenant General Willie Williams, the Chief of Staff, and Carlton Kent, the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps. And as I can say, that contrast this with 1942, when Commandant Holcomb said he didn't want us, that if given a choice of 250,000 Black folks, Black Marines, or 5,000 whites, he'd take the whites. Okay. The visitors gasped as they admired the many Black officers and enlisted, topped by General Walter Gaskin. In fact, they literally lined up to shake the general's hand. It was so good to see him. Their boot camp training site was Montford Point. It was closed in 1949, the same year that Black women were finally allowed into the Corps. Most of the time that the trainees had gone to Paris Island, PI, or San Diego. But for the first time, we old salts found people who were coming in from Paris Island and from San Diego itself. Okay. Fighting in the Pacific heated up in 1943 to 1945, and Montford Point was filled with new arrivals. That's when I came in January 44. After the months of training, we were off to the war, first as the two defense battalions, then depot and ammunition companies. We were hardly known to the public and to the Marine Corps itself. Ooh, let me pull this thing together. Okay. The many Montford Pointers were taunted and even arrested for wearing the Marine Corps uniform. We had to earn the right to fight and even to wear the uniform, but not so in the Pacific battlefronts, however. Our fellow white Marines faced a tough enemy hopping from island to island. We found them battle-weary, tired, and hungry. They showed no prejudice when we showed up with much-needed food, ammunition, and rifles with bayonets. We began treating the wounded and moving bodies, earning the name Black Angels, they called us. Our friends and the enemy quickly learned why we earned expert and sharpshooter badges on the rifle range. This led a higher-ranking officer to send his all-Black companies into the fighting. By 1945, over 2,000 Black Marines were fighting in Okinawa and Iwo Jima. Montford Point Marines were making a difference. The two Marine Corps, one white, one colored, gradually became one. Marines period, after 1949. That's when Black women were accepted. The Korean War began to see needs based on skill, ability, and rank. As the country's bicentennial loomed in 1976, African Americans had proved their willingness and earned the right to fight. 5 heroic Black Marines had given their lives in combat, later earning the Medal of Honor from a grateful nation. Officers like Gary Cooper, Walt Gaskin, and others had all been fighting units while the public began to know more about us, including people like Frank Peterson in our air wing. Like our country, imperfect as it is, the Marine Corps was striving to cure its imperfections. It continues. We can all thank God that as we become a more perfect country and the Marine Corps, we are working together as to make it one. As a Montford Point Marine, I am all proud to have had a part in making the way to make a more perfect country for us, our Marine Corps, and others. One other thing is, my days in the Marine Corps were some of the most glorious I've had, at least my first term in World War II. Overseas, I had an opportunity to really get familiar with many things. I read a lot. I'm a history buff. One of the people I read about was a man by the name of Ralph Bunch, who was working with what was called the Anglo-American Caribbean Commission out in the Caribbean. And I became interested in diplomacy and decided that I would become in the diplomatic and consular service. It took me 30 years and a lot of refusals from State Department before I came in, not at the bottom, but at the top. In addition, during the time I was in Barbados, with things beginning to heat up at the embassy, I talked with the Prime Minister about getting Marine security guards. And for the first time, when the Marine security guards finally joined us, I began to get a lot of attention from Headquarters Marine Corps, not to mention having the Marine security guards saying to me, "Mr. Ambassador, we're here to save your life, and we'll give ours to save you." At that point, I was beginning to come back closer to the Marine Corps, because the generals who called me said, "You're one of us." I didn't realize that I had come out of the Marine Corps with 3 stripes. But I can tell you this, at that point, people like General Wilson, the last commandant to hold the Medal of Honor, began to call me and tell me about things up there. and my closeness to the Marine Corps began to improve. Now, Johnny Johnson, an original Montford Pointer who became the first Assistant Secretary of the Navy, and I had been part of a group when we went into government, and we would stick together and talk about things. He began to tell me a lot of the things that were going on up there. But all of this added to my Marine Corps time, so that by the time people like General Amos came along and I met people, I began to talk with him. I could speak with him as one of their equals. And I have been really flattered at times when I've sat in groups and, for example, at the 2nd Marine Division change of command, Walter, you'll think about this. At the change of command, there were about 4 or 5 different generals, and each one began with Mr. Ambassador, which really inflated me, because thinking back to it now, coming through Montford Point, where you're really, in a sense, almost like nothing. I don't know if you're aware of it, but there was a letter of instruction 421 that said that in any organization in which Blacks and whites serve together, the lowest ranking white would outrank the highest ranking Black. So this is the kind of thing that we had to get along with. But as I say, out in the Pacific, it was in a little bit different. When you showed up with your rifle and a bandolier of bullets and what have you, I should call them rounds, you were different up out there. So again, I'm so proud of all of you. When I see you with all of your stripes, when I see all of the things out there, and I know that if General Gaskin was still over there in Europe at this time, he would be up to his ears as we read about what's happening with Ukraine. But then again, so many of you are doing things now. And I say that when you serve in the Marine Corps, no matter how long or short or high your rank, you are a born leader, and all of us should take the leadership when we come out in our various communities. Last but not least, a lot of our guys came out of the South where you did not show yourself as being too big. You tended to kind of talk quietly. You bent over a little bit. You kind of deferred when people walked down the street in front of you. When you came out of the Marine Corps, you had your head held high, your shoulders back. You spoke up so that you could be heard a mile away, and you looked a person in the eye rather than bending down or something like that. It meant that a lot of the guys and gals would have been in trouble in a sense. But in this, the interesting thing is for those persons who could not believe that we Marines, they did not know what a Marine looked like. Because when you see a Marine, you know one. That's why, again, I'm going to say how proud I am of you guys and what you've been doing and what you are doing and what you will be doing. When every time I see one of you, I get a tear in my eye. On April 22nd, I will be the reviewing officer at the graduating class down at Paris Island. It'll be the first time I'll be showing up at Paris Island. But at the same time, I'll be accompanied by guys who have served overseas in the 1st Marine Division. I'll be served with General Livingston, who is the president of the Medal of Honor Association, who himself is one of our great supporters. And it'll be something entirely different for me. But anyway, again, I want to thank you. And Johnny, you get a special nod from all of us for what you're doing to bring this. I think this is the first one. So thank you very much, Charlie. Back to the group.
Thank you. Ambassador Britton, sir, we thank you. Thank you for your remarks this evening, sir. And thank you so much as well as your service and sacrifice to this nation. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now return to the panel for the final question, starting with Lieutenant General Gaskin. Lieutenant General Gaskin, sir, how do you feel the service of the Montford Point Marines has impacted your career?
Well, let me say first again to Johnny, thank you for the opportunity to bring first my hero, the original Montford Pointer, the Ambassador Britton. And sir, I will always defer, protocol withstanding, that for a Montford Pointer to rise to be an ambassador is the greatest accomplishment and the payback that you have offered. Let me tell you, it's a kind of humbling experience to think about, you know, how far that I was able to come. And then you have to go back and what was once told to me by Sergeant Major Huff. Sergeant Major Huff, when I was at Camp Lejeune, he cursed a lot. And he was asked when I said someone was always kicking you in the butt, that was Sergeant Major Huff. But what he said to me as a young officer that motivated me is that there is no excuse for not knowing your job. And secondly, there's no excuse for not knowing where you came from. He said something to me at once that I will always remember. And he says that when you go into these arenas as a young Marine of African descent, just remember this. The only person that will forget that you are Black is you, because everybody else have made their assessments about your abilities, about what you can do and what you can't do. But he also says that nobody will shoot themselves in the foot if they got someone who's talented and capable and will do it. And so you will earn their respect by your performance. He also says, don't expect to get a pat on the back when you're good, just be that way. The impact that they had on my life at every level, from every promotion that I've ever had in the Corps, an original Montford Pointer was there. The Montford Point Association was always there and will always be from the group that when we started and had our first general officer and General Peterson, and talking to him about his experience and how in Korea, the Montford Pointers was his prop up. And you will always find that if we don't promote ourselves and talk ourselves up, don't expect for it to happen. And that was the environment which we all came into, expecting that we would get the support because the Montford Pointers were there. They were, all of them. And that was the thing that we all talked about, whether that was General Stanley, General Peterson, General Walls, General Bolden, General Leo Williams, General Cooper. We all talked about it is our job to explain to you as you come up what we went through. And guess where we find it out? From the time I experienced when Peterson showed up at Cherry Point and was almost arrested for impersonating an officer because they didn't know of any pilot that was Black. And yet, yeah, he persevered and he says, that's the kind of thing that you're going to do. And if you want to be and help, and don't forget to help those understand your history. So I can't think of a time in any place that I've been, and whether that was at Paris Island as a series and company commander, whether a rifle company commander, rifle battalion commander, a MEU commander, a division commander, and then the chairman of the military committee in NATO, where I haven't sought counsel over all these years for those who were trailblazers. So every time I talk to Montford Pointers or to their family when they're having the Congressional Gold Medal, I thank them for allowing me to stand on their shoulders. You know, some of them said, you can follow my footprints. Some said, you walk along beside you. but most of them says, stand on our shoulder so you can see the horizon. So you'll know what success looks like and what accomplishment is. But always remember what Huff said. Don't forget where you came from. And don't forget that somebody else have already made an assessment about you, that you have to prove the way. And I am so happy to because all of us are Marines, and everybody around the world, they know about a Marine. But when they see, and that's what I often say to the general officers, when they see, there's always the same thing. I didn't know the Marine Corps had generals. Really, and it's because reason why we have generals is because of the Montford Pointers. Reason why we have the opportunity to serve because they fought for the right to fight. They persevered. Those giants made all of this possible for us. So let us not forget that the legacy that we put forward, the ship that's named after the Montford Pointers, the monument, the ship that's named after Peterson, the Marines with the Medal of Honor, always remember that these Montford Pointers came from every clime and place. They came as such as regiments hand down forever. They came because their life was as important for being who. And I always say to everyone when I'm talking, I talk about what Dr. Martin Luther King says, that fleecy locks and dark complexion does not forfeit nature's claims. Skins may differ, but affection both black and white the same. And if I can reach the poles or I touch them with a span, I must be measured by my mind, because the mind is a measure of man. And that's what the Montford Point instilled in me throughout the career, is that be all you can be, but be accountable and represent from where we came from, and which made us as good as any Marine that ever wore the uniform, and prove that that distance of 335 miles between Montford Point and Parris Island meant nothing except opportunity for us to be Marines. So the impact on my career has been tremendous. The opportunity to be an infantry officer and cover every rank has been because of what I heard for those that were in the trenches and those that taught me what leadership is. And if you take care of your Marines, they will take care of you. Thank you, darling. And again, Johnny, for the opportunity to share, again, my heroes and those who the legacy will always be, because it lives in us. Thank you.
Thank you, General.
Lieutenant General Walter Gaskin, thank you, sir. Sergeant Major Robin Fornter. Ma'am, please share with us, how do you feel the service of the Montford Point Marines has impacted your career?
Yes, thank you again, darling. Amazing, Lieutenant General Gaskin. It's always hard to follow you. You are amazing, sir. I appreciate those words. They are definitely resonating. And Ambassador, sir, I am so humbled to listen. I think this is what today was about. I know we're on the panel and we are expressing our thoughts, but you was the draw for me. I really, truly enjoy hearing firsthand accounts and just your thought process, and really want to hear from you and see how we are honoring you and those who came before us. That's kind of what, for me, as I thought about this question, that impact, just the storytelling. The things are written in black and white very often, but when the storytelling and you can hear it firsthand, that does something to you. It resonates deep down in your soul. I was there at the Capitol, sir. I remember when the Congressional Medal was about to be honored, and moved everything on my calendar, told my commanding officer, I need to be in Washington, D.C. this is definitely something I want to volunteer for. This is history. This is our history. I want to be there. And I recall that day inside the Capitol, and I recall that day at the Commandant's Mansion at 8th and I, but more solemnly just watching from a distance, I really stood in the back and just watched. Somebody spoke earlier about when you feel so honored and you watch these men, as some in wheelchairs, some with canes, but when it was time for the Marines hymn to play or time for them to stand up, the courage and the tenacity it took when they stood up, because they were so proud of their service, so proud of what it stood for. You couldn't help but sit back there with chills. And if I think for my career, that's the impact that continues to stay with me. When I think about the struggles and the strength it took to do what you do, I'm always reminded of myself. Many people ask, why did you stay so long in the Marine Corps? I'm a double minority, African-American woman. And I tell you, I knew it was very important to me to make sure that we paved the way. So when I hear Morgan Drinkard and things that she's accomplishment, I remember my time on the drill field. I remember paving ways. I remember this is what it's all about. I remember that because somebody did it for me. So I think of the Montford Point Marines as being that example of that resilience that's built in all of us. And sometimes we could be our own worst enemy and forget about that. But I think and listen to you, Ambassador, and I'm recharged again and I'm renewed again, just simply from today, that it's still work to be done and we still need to continue this fight. We still need to be an example ourselves, looking ourselves in the mirror and asking ourselves, what are you doing? And what effect are you having? And I hope to continue to do that even on this side of the chapter. But that's why I stayed. I stayed because it was tough. I walked into rooms where I knew I wasn't wanted. I walked in the rooms and faced a bunch of situations where I knew it was up against me. But being able to still stand there tall and proud and being able to do my part so that those behind me, African-American women, or just Marines, it's that of service. So I appreciate the Montford Point Marines as just being a class act all to themselves. And it really does pain me sometimes to hear that it's taken us so long to even teach our young Marines of who you are and what the original history, I believe, should be taught so much earlier. So we will continue that fight, and we continue to see, as you say, the imperfect America become perfect. But that fight will continue, and I will continue to do that. So once again, Atlanta chapter, thank you for this opportunity. It is definitely an impactful day, and I hope the listeners are taking something away from each one of us. But Montford Point continues to stand, and I pray that that legacy is louder and prouder in the years to come as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Darling, can I offer a quick word?
Yes, sir.
Last night I talked with Ted Peterson, former sergeant in the 1st Marine Division, who will be 99 on April 16th. He's 90. He lost his sight because during the training with the 51st Defense Battalion, he was within an explosion, and the doctor told him he would lose his sight one day. He finally lost it just about a month ago, but he has our prayers and our thoughts and our hopes for him as he reaches his 99th. The other thing was an unusual thing. I'm 96, by the way. I had a call from a gentleman in Texas who was in my platoon, and he was returning my call. I reminded him that he was the honor man in my platoon, that he had fired expert, and he was the first one to get his PFC stripes. He had forgotten much of this, but I was able to bring him, bring him back to his days in the Marine Corps. And he has called me several times now because he is so happy to learn about himself that he had completely forgotten over those many years. I think he's about the same age as I, but sometimes memories fail and friends be few. And that's all I can say at this moment. Thank you so much again, Rachel.
And thank you so much, Ambassador Britton, for sharing that with us. And Sergeant Major Robin Fornter, ma'am, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Sergeant Major Mario P. Fields, sir, will you please share with us, how do you feel the service of the Montford Point Marines has impacted your career?
Well, I want to say, Darlene, first of all, congrats to you. It is tough to moderate in a virtual space. And you've done an amazing job. So I want to say thank you to the General and the rest of the most inspirational Marines I've seen on a virtual platform. I think I'm going to go outside, maybe do a couple of push-ups and pull-ups after this. This is this is amazing. And Ambassador, you brought back memories, Ambassador. I used to work at the old Marine Corps Museum in the Navy Yard, Washington Navy Yard, before we moved it to Quantico off of I-95. And I remember reading about when the Commandant said he did not want any Black Marines. And when I read that as a young gunny, keeping in mind, my first introduction to Montford Point Marines was, as an 18-year-old Lance Corporal at, Camp Johnson. I started to think, how would I feel if the current Commandant at that time said, if you are African American, if you're a minority, but I don't want you. You know what I mean? I don't want you. I would rather take any human being before I take you as a Marine. Wow. And for me, this is very personal because it's the first time that I've met someone that survived that and that was resilient. And although that Commandant said he didn't want you because you were Black, you guys still thrived. And so for me, that last sentence in my bio, I attribute that to my first introduction of Montford Point Marines at Camp Johnson, December of 1993. I said they had to have unquestionable integrity. There was no room for error. I know people were looking. Hell, y'all was doing the right thing and you still got in trouble. I said the second thing, resilience. I mean, as a Marine, the Montford Point Marines embody resilience than no other person I can think of at that time. The third word was accountability. I said, Mario, stop pointing the finger for anything, including your height. Be accountable for what you decide to do. And if you choose to do something, you be the best. And then the passion to help others. I mean, you're 96. I mean, you look like you're 50. So I think I could get some bonus points, Ambassador. There's hope for this little Sergeant Major, but to dedicate your life to help others. And so, darling, thanks for the question. But the impact for me has been less on the career, more personally as a man, as a father, as a son, as an uncle, as a neighbor, as a church member, as a human being. And I truly love you and appreciate everything you guys have done. Thank you.
Thank you, Master Sergeant. Thank you, Sergeant Major Mario Fields. We love you too, sir. Thank you. Master Sergeant Mario Harris. Sir, please share with us, how do you feel the service of the Montford Point Marines has impacted your career?
First, I'd like to say thank you, Ambassador Britton, for staying the course, and all other Montford Point Marines for doing what was necessary, for doing what a lot of men couldn't do. So I want to thank you and pay homage to you all for that. I thank you because it allowed me to come out of small places like Mobile and Grand Bay and Bala Battery and out of the seafood industry and be able to join the Marine Corps because of the path that you all created. It allowed me to meet men and women from all over the world. It allowed them to pour into me, to understand that I didn't have time to think about who didn't like me, and regardless of what that reason was for. I didn't have time to think about that. As you men didn't. You didn't think about those things. Yes, you went through a lot more than any of us will ever understand that's on this panel. But you all knew that there was greatness that you had to accomplish, because there was millions of people that would come behind you. So it affected me very much in my career, especially when I learned about it and I did research and reading about it, even up until today. I didn't have time to get in my feelings. I had to get to work and I had to get it done. And I don't know about you, great men and women, but I need a lot of mentorship. And I stay connected to great men and women so that there's maybe not a path, but maybe a sidewalk that I can prepare and create for someone to come in the future. Thank you again, Sergeant Major Johnny Higdon, Ms. Darling, Ambassador Britton, Lieutenant General Gaskins, Sergeants Majors, and all other great panelists on this panel today. I appreciate the opportunity for giving my few words. Thank you.
We appreciate it, sir. Thank you, Master Sergeant Mario Harris. Gunnery Sergeant Morgan Drinkard. Ma'am, please share with us, how do you feel the service of the Montford Point Marines has impacted your career?
I feel that the service of the Montford Point Marines impacted my career personally, just based off of them doing the hard work and them having to endure things that I couldn't even possibly imagine having to go through in the Marine Corps now. I joined the Marine Corps in 2010. So the Marine Corps has changed a lot, you know, from the 1940s until, you know, 2010 and even until now. So I couldn't imagine the things that they had to endure. Like I said before, my goal is for me to become an officer. And with Frederick C. Branch, it seemed like he struggled, like he had a really challenging time, you know, to just have the opportunity to submit a package to become an officer. And even for me now, all I have to do is just submit the paperwork and, you know, it gets routed through and it's either yay or nay, but I don't have to fight. And like I said before, I just really feel like they definitely did the hard work and they have it to where the Marine Corps, where we don't have to fight as much or put up a struggle when we would like to do other things and have other opportunities in the Marine Corps. So that's how I feel that they impacted my career personally.
Gunnery Sergeant Morgan Drinkard, ma'am, we thank you. Thank you so much. James Clausell. Sir, how do you feel the service of the Montford Point Marines has impacted your career?
Well, thank you, darling. For me, it's a simple yet complicated answer that's really simple. But first of all, as a Marine logistician, what were the Montford Point Marines? Logisticians. Had those Montford Point Marines not been on the beaches in the Pacific providing that logistical support, the situation could have been different. So once again, hanging my hat on the lineage which I come from, those were, in my eyes, the first Marine logisticians that I look up to. But more simple than that is, you know, we hear the phrase and the saying all the time, pass the torch. When are you going to pass the torch? Who's passing the torch to you? But what I've learned from the Montford Point Marines is really, it's not about passing the torch. It's about lighting the torches of others. So there's more torches on that path as you go down. And they've paved the way with their torches and they didn't put them down. They passed them on and lit my torch. They lit the Sergeant Major's torch, the Gunny's torch, the General's torch. They've lit a fire under everybody who's come into their presence. And that's what I learned from them, is that I cannot pass my torch on. I have to light the torch of others. And when it's time for me to go, my torch will be interned and the flame will never go out, because those who I've lit their torches for will keep marching on as I go on. And as the Montford Point Marines go on, their legacy will be the flame and the fuel that we keep using to light other torches. So they've taught me to be a good steward, to pay it forward, to remember where we come from, but also know where we're going and provide a clear path to when we go into that destination and when we get there. Thank everybody for this. This is amazing. Ambassador, thank you. I love you, sir. And I just appreciate all your words of wisdom. And I do want to say, for anybody who does not know the ambassador, if you spend 5 minutes in the room with the ambassador, you will be 50 years smarter. He is a living, breathing history book. And sometimes you might sit there and say, I don't know what this has to do. And before you can say what happened with, the ambassador has already circled back around and let you know. And you say, okay, I get it now. So thank you. And thank you, everybody. And thank you, Ambassador. And thank you to our original Montford Pointers.
Thank you so much, Jim. Ms. Thompson, the people who are listening need to know that when Fred Branch was given his commission, he was also given his discharge because the letter of instruction said that no Black person could be superior to a white Marine in the Corps. And that's why he had to leave the Corps the day he received his commission. The next one, of course, coming up in 1948 was Fred John Earl Rudder from Purdue. He was the one who at least came on as a regular Marine officer at a time when hopefully letter of instruction 421 had been revoked. Certainly the Truman Doctrine was being germinated at that time, and so it changed a lot of things for all of us. Thank you.
Ms. Thompson?
Yes?
Joe Geeter, may I for a moment?
Please, sir.
Well, first, again, Johnny, thank you. This today is what I've been working for 44 years. I heard a lot of people feel maybe a level of guilt for not knowing about the Montford Pointers. I want you to know that you did not know about it because the Marine Corps did not want you to know about it. It's just that simple. Because when you bring up Montford Point, now you got to bring up Thomas Holcomb. Now you got to bring up the racist past. I had a sergeant major in the Marine Corps, 26 years in the Marine Corps, called me up right after I retired. I retired as a Master Gunny 21 years ago. He says, Master Gunny, I am just finding about the Montford Pointers. Please educate me. Sergeant Major, African-American, 26 years in, never heard the Montford Pointers. So please don't feel guilty about it because they didn't want you to know about it. As far as Gunny, when you was on Paris Island, that was Master Gunnery Sergeant Tyrone Jackson that brought those Montford Pointers there to review the parade and to be the honored guest. As far as Mr. Clausell goes, recruiting duty and large distinction, I'm one of those two. And that St. Louis event you went to was called the Chosen Few Banquet. And that was their signature event for many, many years. I'm the most fortunate gentleman, Marine on this panel because I worked for Montford Pointer as a 19-year-old Lance Corporal who gave me a book called Blacks in the Marine Corps that was published first in 1975. I read that book cover to cover on a 15-hour flight to Okinawa, Japan, and I landed in Okinawa, Japan, born again Montford Point. So I've been teaching this history since February 1978. And I'm so glad the things that I've been doing for 44 years, I'm looking at it on camera. And for the Gunny, you're the future. I think you're the only one here, Gunny, on active duty. So we've got to connect because you're going to be the link, just like I'm fortunate enough to be the link between Sergeant Major Huff and Brooks Gray and all these other Montford Pointers that mentored me coming up. You're still on active duty. We need you. So let's connect. And I'm going to give you an education that you never believed. So let's connect, please. But again, thank you, Johnny, for that. I just had to get that in there because I heard almost from everybody that they felt a level of guilt for not knowing it. It's not your fault. I lobbied Lieutenant General Carol Mutter for a couple of years when she was a 3-star general to get this in training when I was on active duty. So I've been fighting for this since I was Lance Corporal Geeter in 1978 until this morning when we awarded the Purple Heart to Timberlake Kirby, who received a Purple Heart for wounds in action in June of 1944 on the island of Saipan. So Johnny can tell you, this is what I do every day. And I am open to you. And Johnny would tell you, if you send me your address, you'll get a package in the mail tomorrow. I guarantee you. And I'll give you an education. So thank you again for the opportunity, Johnny.
Most certainly. Thank you again. Thank you. I would like to thank all of our distinguished panel for your heartfelt answers to the questions today and for continuing to provide mentorship to the next generations of Marines. In closing, please allow me to have our distinguished remarks from the chapter president of Atlanta Chapter 5, retired Sergeant Major Johnny Higdon.
Wow. Again, I want to thank everyone for joining us here this evening. A special thank you to the All-Star panel for making time in your busy schedules to be a part of this program. It was a pleasure to serve with each of you during my time in the active ranks, and I'm grateful for your continued friendship in my retirement years. I especially want to thank our moderator this evening, Ms. Darlene Thompson. I've always been a fan of your professionalism and your dedication to whatever project you're a part of. I've personally witnessed you host several events, and they've always been top-notch. So thank you for lending your expertise to our program.
Yes, sir.
And of course, I want to thank the original Montford Point Marines for their courage and sacrifice, which made my success and others like me possible in the Marine Corps. And of course, thank you, Ambassador Britton, sir, for your mentorship and wisdom, and for trusting me with the legacy of the Montford Point Marines as I fulfill my duties as president of the Atlanta chapter and look for innovative ways to increase our footprint and take the chapter to new heights. Again, just another reminder to all of our viewers, please hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. We're on a mission to bring more visibility to the service and sacrifice of the original Montford Point Marines. We want to make sure their story is more than a little known Black history fact, and yet instead becomes common knowledge by all Marines and the public at large. But we can't do this without your help. So browse our social media links and check out our website to see ways that you can get involved. There are opportunities to donate to specific programs, as well as volunteer your time to activities that are happening in your local communities. We're also continuously looking for original Montford Point Marines to ensure they receive the recognition they truly deserve. So if any of you know of anyone who you think may be an original Montford Point Marine, contact us so we can ensure they all receive their Congressional Gold Medal, or in most cases, the families can receive it on their behalf. Anyone with specific questions can can find contact information on our chapter website under the contact tab. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your call to action. So get involved and help us preserve the legacy of the original Montford Point Marines. Thank you again. Stay safe. Have a great evening. And as always, Semper Fidelis.
Amen.
Semper Fi.
Hurrah!
This concludes our program. Thank you again for joining us. Make it a great, safe evening as well, and peace and love.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Marine Corps. 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 And it's all in my green. Marine Corps. Anybody who asks me why, Marine Corps. Here's my reply. Here's the read to the day I die. Marine Corps. And a simple fire. Marine Corps. 1, 2, 3, 4. Marine Corps. Tell me now what you're waiting for. Marine Corps. 1, 2, 3, 4. Marine Corps. I'm gonna sing it some more. Marine Corps. To the Bellow Woods, make it so it's understood. Regime to a border canal, big but just to everywhere. Roll the shoulder to the Ho Chi Minh. I think it's time that we do it again. Beirut, Lebanon. I think it's time that we get it done. 1, 2, 3, 4. Tell me now. Whose voice is that?